Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head down to England once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good couple of times before. I've had some very nice beers from these guys in the past, and they are a very respected and very kind of diverse brewery, if you like. They brew a whole host of different things. So for this one then we are going to head down to London, and to Bermondsey to be specific, and we're having a look at what must be my fourth or fifth beer from the Kernel Brewery. So this one I think should be very interesting. This is the Imperial Brown Stout, London 1856. Apparently it's based on a historic recipe from the Barclay Perkins brewery in London. So yeah, I think this will be quite a quirky beer actually, and I'm sure that one of my friends, Craig from Kent Beer Reviews, I'm sure he's had a go at this and told me that it was a really nice one. I think he drank this on one of the live streams that we were on together. But yeah, this is a brewery, as I say, I would love to get a few more beers from. I've only done 3 or 4 so far. The first one was the table beer, the second one I think was an Imperial Porter, if I remember rightly, and then the latest one, which was just a few months ago, that was like a sour saison, if I remember rightly. We get a couple of their beers through the Tillfällig temporary sortiments in Systembolaget in Sweden, but not a lot. This is a brewery that I definitely want to visit sometime. But Craig, that I mentioned a second ago, he and I are planning to do an out and about video at the Kernel Brew Pub in London at some point. Hopefully we can do that at some stage throughout 2021. It would be great to film that with Craig and do a few tastings and things with him on the channel. So very much looking forward to that, and I really hope that we can make it happen. But yeah, I think it should be really interesting, this beer. A 9.5% Imperial Stout based on a historical recipe from London. Incidentally, I bought this beer at the House of Trembling Madness in York. Great web shop on there. The English beer tubers tell me it's one of the best value ones that you're going to find in England, but they do have their physical shop in York as well actually, and from what I gather, I was there back in 2017, but from what I gather it has gotten better over the years. It has got even better than it was. It was great at the time, but yeah, do go and check those guys out if you are interested in some English craft beers. So yeah, curious to see how this one turns out. Nice to return to the Kernel, as I've said, and hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this beer as well. So let's see how we get on then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from the Kernel Brewery before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the English beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to at the moment because I am enjoying a little bit of time at home in the motherland, and we've got a steady supply of English beers over in Sweden these days, which is great. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about the Kernel Brewery then, on to my brewery notes. So the Kernel Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Bermondsey in London, and they were founded by Evan O'Riordan, who is originally from Ireland. But he was apparently inspired to get into brewing by his friends in New York after they took him to a beer bar, and he was just blown away by the completely different approach in New York, and the focus being on the beer rather than on like having a regular pint or the regular bar. So they were actually really focusing on the ingredient side of the beer and getting the full flavour out of it. That's what really got him. But he'd been working with cheese for a very long time with Neil's Yard Dairy, and he had been sent to New York to help Whole Foods set up a cheese room there, and he was really quite well versed in this whole thing, and he became fascinated when he would meet people that were just as knowledgeable as he was about cheese but about beer. But when he decided to get into brewing, he read the books of Charlie Papazian, and he joined the London amateur brewing setup. When he moved to London, he'd apparently discovered Brewdog Punk IPA, and this helped convince him that people were really interested in the more American style of craft beers. But the brewery started up in a railway arch with a 600 litre kit, and they've been growing ever since. They stick mainly to brewing the lighter kind of hoppy styles of beer, but they do have the occasional sour and dark beer, and you know, incidentally, it's 2 dark beers you see me review now from these guys, and then 1 sour beer. I've not had the chance to try their pale ales and lagers and IPAs and stuff like this, so that's something I definitely need to do when I go and visit the bar. But yeah, mainly it is kind of lighter, sort of sessionable beers that they do. But apparently all the people in the brewery take turns at brewing the beer. You know, one member of staff apparently brews on average one day every 2 weeks, which is pretty cool actually. So everyone that works at the Kernel gets a chance to brew a beer and play around with the recipe a little bit, from what I understand. But they now also have a tap room, a few doors down from the brewery, which opened back in 2019, and as of January 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've got around 490 different beers that they've produced so far, according to Untappd. So yeah, like I say, a very, very prolific brewery. They tend to like change a hop or a malt or something like that in all their different beers, but they do a whole host of different things. You'll get porters from these guys, Imperial porters, the occasional Imperial Stout, Saisons, sour Saisons, lagers, pale ales, you name it, these guys have probably brewed it at some stage. So I would love to try a few different styles from these guys when I do finally get to visit Kernel. That will be the aim of the game, is to get a few bottles and things that are different styles that I've not tried from them before. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about the Kernel Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. I'll just have a little quick look at the artwork on this one before we open up. As you can see, it is pretty straightforward, that sort of cardboard lining thing that is kind of typical of Kernel. It tells you a little bit on the back here: bottle conditioned beer, store upright and pour gently. If you prefer to leave the yeast sediment inside the bottle, or to leave the, if you prefer to leave, yeah, that read it right. Brain's not working these days, guys. But yeah, just a plain silver bottle cap on this one, and yeah, it is pretty cool. I do like that about Kernel, how they are, you know, they still have that kind of you know, sort of brew pub vibe about them, always brewing different stuff actually. I think that's very, very cool. So yeah, I do need to try a few more different beers from Kernel actually. A great brewery that are very, very well respected, and I look forward to doing that brew pub trip with Craig like I mentioned earlier. But yeah, as I said before, this beer, the Imperial Brown Stout, London 1856, 9.5% Imperial Stout, based on the name, the Barclay Perkins Brewery recipe from that year, from that brewery down in London. So yeah, I think this one will be pretty good. I can't remember how much I actually paid for this beer. I think it might have been about, you know, £4 or £5, something like that. Still cheaper than the Swedish beers, or the Danish beers, I guess. The Swedish beers aren't too bad, but yeah, I'm sure this one will be quite an interesting beer. But yeah, as you can see, nice little bit of CO2 popping out of the glass. Let's get this guy out and into the glass and see how we get on. Out of the bottle, I should say. Keep doing that these days. I'm really mincing my words. My English has got worse since I've got better at Swedish. Genuinely has. But yeah, I think this. Oh, look at the head on this. That's beautiful, beautiful looking beer, I have to say. Yeah, that's craziness, absolute craziness. But yeah, 9.5% Imperial Stout. This one. I'm very much looking forward to this. Let me just check. There we go. There we go. So yes, as you can see, and as you would expect from an Imperial Stout, this one has poured a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. If we shine the light through it, it's pretty much black as night. Yeah, it has, you know, it has a wee tiny little hint of a ruby edge to it, but not very much. This beer is pretty damn hazy and black as night, but you can see there's a solid finger. Yeah, I would say that's a solid finger of a frothy, I would say kind of mocha coloured head there, medium tan. Not the darkest of heads you're going to come across right enough, but it certainly looks beautiful. I mean, just look at the fluff in that. You guys can see just how fluffy that head is in this one. But yeah, it looks absolutely lovely. That thing looks as if it's going to be silky as hell. But yeah, looks great. One or two tiny little bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, and one or two popping up towards the bottom of the head there. But in terms of an Imperial Stout, this is pretty much what you would expect, and it looks like a beautiful example. The head on that beer is one of the best I've seen in quite a while actually. The level of froth on that is just right, so we must be drinking this beer in very good condition. It says bottled on the 5th of July 2020, so yeah, it's been in the bottle about 6 months roughly, about 6 months. I'm drinking this one for you on the 8th of January 2021, but yeah, this just looks beautiful. It really does. Nothing surprising about the appearance of this beer, but it just looks very, very nice. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma then and see how we get on. Nothing overly surprising about the appearance of this beer. Oh yeah, this is a quite old. This is old school. Yeah. Yeah. Lovely, lovely smelling beer, I have to say. So straight away with this one, you get a lovely mix of kind of roasty, toasty black malt coming out of it. You get a lovely bit of brown bread in there. You can smell a wee bit of a kind of chocolatey quality to it. There's a little bit of brown sugar in there as well, like a well-fired, toasty brown sugar. But mainly, it comes across as, you know, roasty and toasty and black, and then brown bready. That's the main thing I'm getting out of this one, which is quite interesting. And I suppose back in these days, they wouldn't have had as many varieties of malts and hops and things that we've got today, you know. So this one, it does smell a little bit more kind of straight shooting, if that makes sense. Roasty black malt, brown bread, a little bit of kind of chocolate there. It's kind of like a powdery, dark chocolate that you get out of this one. And you've also got a very sweet, well, I say sweet, but it's quite a roasty, toasty brown sugar. There's one or two sort of woody, nutty elements in there. So, yeah, you can smell, you can smell a little bit of the woodiness and then a nuttiness a little bit further forward. But the smoothness of this beer, that's the first thing that strikes me, or the main thing that gets me about the aroma of this beer, is it just smells ridiculously, ridiculously smooth. So yeah, but very, very old school smelling beer, this one. This is, it sort of comes across like a kind of traditional, it really comes across as quite a traditional type stout, this one. This probably smells quite similar to what I imagine a lot of English cask stouts smell like. You don't get so many cask stouts up here in Scotland, right enough. There's not so much cask beer, it is more tap beer. I think the, yeah, even the more kind of traditionally orientated breweries here in Scotland tend to be more about the kind of keg rather than the cask, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's interesting. This smells like a very, very old school beer, and it seems as if I'm stating the obvious with it, but smooth breadiness, roasty, toasty black malts, a little bit of a kind of woody and nutty subtlety to the beer, some chocolatey notes in there, like a powdery dark chocolate, like a 70-80% cocoa sort of thing, and a toasty brown sugary element. So yeah, just take a little bit of time and enjoy that malty side of the aroma, because that's what this beer is all about. The hoppy side of things then, yeah, the hops in this, it has to either be, I think it's Kent Goldings. I do think it's Kent Goldings that's in this. It doesn't quite have the ashiness to be Fuggles, I think. Fuggles has a little bit more ashiness than that. It could be a little bit of Fuggles, right enough. Or Fugles, I'm never sure the exact pronunciation of it, so let me know about that in the comment section below. How do you pronounce Fuggles, Fugles, whatever. But yeah, a little bit of that. It's got a little bit of earthiness in there, it builds the more you smell of the beer, right enough, so a little bit of earthiness. You've also got a little bit of a herbal quality in there, which is one of the distinctive things about English hops. Actually, they've always got a little bit of herbal character there. You get a nice, fairly bright floral aromaticity, and you've also just got a wee bit of grassiness there. This beer, as I say, has been in the bottle about 6 months, so the hoppy character will still be there to a degree, but you know, after a year, I guess most of it would kind of drop away, to be honest with you. But let's have a little look at the fruity side of the beer then. I think we've covered the green component of the beer quite nicely. I would say good bit of earthiness, but then the green, the sort of floral and grassy side of this beer are still quite prominent, to be fair. But if you get this and age it a little bit, which you can do, they're recommending July 2025 as the last time to drink. If you age this a little bit, those hops will drop down a wee bit. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, that makes the fruity side of this beer makes me wonder if there could be a bit of Bramlin's Cross in here, because it does have a little bit of that almost red fruity thing that you would expect either of Northern Brewer from Germany or Bramlin's Cross from England. It's quite a popular hop to use in the barley wines and things like that. The Bramlin's Cross gives you a lovely fruity character, actually. But yeah, you can smell a little bit of that kind of plummy note to it. It's got a little bit of an oily kind of plummy quality to it. Some nice juicy figs, but for me, quite a lot of juicy blackcurrant and a more oily blackberry in this beer as well. So it's a very typical old school English stout, this one, and as I've told you on the channel before, I'm not a huge fan of the traditional English beers that are on the lighter end of the spectrum. Porters and stouts though, that for me is what that for me is what English traditional beer is all about. Really like these beers. But yeah, take a little bit of a smell of this one and see how you get on with it. I think the aroma is really nice, and it really gets more and more fruity the more that I smell of it. So yeah, take a little bit of time to enjoy that, but you know, let's have a taste of this one now and see how we get on. This one is the Imperial Brown Stout, London 1856, based on a Barclay Perkins brewery recipe from London from that same year, brewed by the Kernel Brewery in Bermondsey in London. Let's get stuck into this one. Slàinte, Skull, cheers, and do make sure you check out my friend Craig at Kent Beer Reviews. I'll put the link to his channel in the description below. I'm sure he's reviewed this beer. Slàinte. Oh yeah. That's a very, very old school beer. It's like a kind of, it's just so straight shooting, but it's just so well executed. Yeah, big thumbs up to Kernel for this. This is very nice. This is really different from the, you know, these kind of modern imperial stouts that we get. To try something like this, I think, is really nice. It is basically like a kind of traditional English stout, as I said, but just amped up and has the alcohol taken up on it. You're going to notice straight away though, this beer builds dryness quite quickly. It really gets quite a dry, bitter quality from the malty side of it coming out very, very quickly. But yeah, how do you say, the malty and fruity side of this beer is just, they really stand out actually. It does have a wee bit of alcohol warmth straight away as well, which you can definitely feel that out of this one. But yeah, where to start with this one? The first thing, as I say, you're going to notice is the smoothness of this beer, the dryness and the fruitiness. Yeah, completely different kettle of fish to the more modern imperial stouts, absolutely. Yeah. So, where to start with this beer then? Straight away with this beer you can feel that nice roasty toasty black malt just blanketing the middle of your tongue. You can feel that going right across the middle of your palate there. It spreads back onto that back third of your tongue. On top of that you get a nice kind of brown bready quality. It sits on top of that middle part of your palate quite nicely, and it also you know, it also just on the back third of your palate it really thickens up a little bit. You can really feel just a thicker bready quality coming out of the beer. So that is very, very nice in that sense as well. It's just, it's properly old school this, and it's just a complete change of pace to what we're used to with these big, you know, RIS Russian Imperial Stout beers, the sweet stouts, the pastry stouts and all that these days. It's really nice to try something like this, let's just say that. But yeah, in terms of the other stuff in this one, as I say, roasty toasty black malt forming the backbone of the beer. The back third of your palate is distinctly thicker, more brown bready. But then as you sit on top of it, you do get like a very dry, almost powdery dark chocolate coming out of this beer, which is very, very nice. And the beer in the middle of your palate, it really, really dries out the further that you go into the aftertaste. So yeah, in the very centre of your palate though, you do have a wee bit of a kind of brown sugary note there, but that sort of very high cocoa powdery chocolate there, that kind of sits just on top of the brown bready notes there, but you can feel those roasty black malty notes just pushing their way through that bready layer in the beer, which is really interesting. As I say, this beer really progresses and becomes more and more dry the further you go into it. So yeah, I really like that about this one for sure. It's a very quirky beer. But yeah, this one for me is really, just really quirky and interesting for sure. But yeah, it's in the middle of your palate, as I say, you get a wee bit of a kind of, there is a wee bit of a kind of, it's not even oily, you can just get a bit of a brown, sugary, caramelly sort of sweetness out of this one. Not oily, a little bit toasty. Underneath that you get a little bit of a kind of Underneath it you just get a little bit of kind of you get a little bit of that kind of high cocoa chocolate in there. But yeah, this beer really becomes very dry and roasty and toasty the further that you go into it. If you go to the front corners of your palate and then go diagonally back, you get a little bit of a kind of brown sugary, a little bit of a kind of more woody, you get the brown sugar there, but underneath that you get a little bit of a woody element, and there's maybe a tiny, if you go to the centre of your palate and then just move forward, there's maybe a tiny little bit of a kind of nutty thing coming out of the beer. But yeah, I really like how all of that goes together. So yeah, the malty side of this beer I think is really well executed. It's nowhere near as complex as you're going to get from some of these more modern imperial stouts, but it's really well crafted, and you can just tell it's like an amped up version of a traditional stout actually. So yeah, thumbs up to Kernel for this one. I think they've put the malt base, pardon me, is the most important part of a beer like this, and they've pulled it off really well. So yeah, hoppy side of things then. Back corners of the palate, there's a good little bit of earthiness in this one. I could see there being a little bit of fuggles in this, to be honest with you, because the earthiness does have a wee bit of that almost ashy quality to it. But then yeah, as you move further forward along the side of the palate, it mellows out a wee bit, you get a little touch of a herbal quality in there, and as you reach the kind of front corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of, you do have a nice little bit of a sort of floral aromatic-y kind of thing in there as well. But then round the front curve of the palate, the beer has a little bit of just a lighter sort of grassy sort of thing. So yeah, the grassiness does have a wee touch of zest to it, but that's quite muted as it tends to be with English hops. But you do have a fairly, you do have a fairly bright floral aromaticity as well, which you can get from some English hops. But I think Fugels and maybe Kent Goldings in this one. I think Bramling's Cross, nah, not so much. Yeah, let's have a little look at the fruity side of the beer then. I think we've covered the green side of it pretty well actually. Yeah. So for me, the fruity side of the beer, it's quite an oily fruity character that comes out of this one actually, and that's what did make me think Bramling's Cross originally. So yeah, when you take the beer in, it's got a wee bit of a raisiny kind of plummy note to it. That comes out of the back of that front third of your palate. As I always say, you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And for me, it's got a little bit of a kind of, it has got a little bit of a more raisiny sharpness and an oily plummy kind of note there. A little bit of a kind of figgy quality in there as well as you reach the kind of front part of the palate. But then as you reach the front half of that front third of your tongue, black currants in there, an oily kind of blackberry-ish note, and then that kind of lingers there into the aftertaste. The fruits for me are distinctly oily, but the beer overall is quite a dry one. This is quite a dry stout. The other thing I've not said in the review, come to think of it, is that this is one of the first brown stouts I've had, but apparently this was fairly common when it comes to English traditional beer. So is it the case that a brown stout is a little bit more kind of bitter and dry? But then again, that could be the bready notes that are representative of a kind of brown stout. So yeah, not quite sure about that. That's definitely something I would have to investigate a little bit more and maybe see about getting another brown stout from somewhere. So if you have got brown stout recommendations, let me know about them in the comments section below. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, I would say you know, this beer is around the sort of top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. Carbonation is very smooth in this one, and I think the intention is that it's supposed to have that sort of cask beer, that English cask ale mouthfeel to it, and they pull that off really well in this one. So yeah, there is carbonation to this one, but it feels as if it's virtually like non-existent. It feels very creamy. Creamy is maybe not the right word. It just feels very smooth, this beer overall, to be honest with you. But you have, you know, you really do have a dryness to this beer. This is a very dry beer overall for me, but it just is really, it's a very nice dryness. It's got quite a strong aftertaste to it, this beer, and it just pulls it off very well. So in terms of in terms of bitterness, this beer has you know, an 80. I think this has to have an 80 IBU, somewhere around that region. This is quite a heavy bitter beer, both from the malty side of things, and the hops are contributing a little bit to that as well, the earthy component of the hops. Maybe a little bit of Fuggles, maybe a wee bit of you know, Kent Goldings as well, I would think. So yeah, that would definitely be it. But it's got a lovely fruity character to it, and it does make me wonder. The fruit, I don't think you can get that intense fruitiness simply from Kent Goldings. So is there a bit of Bramling's Cross in this? That wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, the fruitiness is lovely and oily, a little bit of juicy character to it, good bit of bitterness. Then you've got a smoothness and dryness in there as well, which is great. So yeah, this is just a lovely, lovely beer. Very traditionally orientated in my mind, but you know, executed very, very well. So I think that's a good place to kind of leave it when it comes to this review. So yeah, this was a really, really interesting beer for me. The Imperial Brown Stout, London 1856, from Kernel Brewery in Bermondsey in London. Beautifully done, very traditional, and just amped up a little bit, I think. So yeah, if you get the chance to try this one, I think you will not be disappointed by this. It's quite different. It's very different compared to the modern Imperial Stouts, but it's executed very, very well in my opinion. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from the Kernel Brewery, and if you have tried this one, do share your opinions. Let me know some other brown stouts I should try as well. That's a sort of sub-style that I really should look into a little bit more. Make sure you check out my friend Craig from Kent Beer Reviews. I think he, and probably Jake Overton at Jake O Beer, he probably reviews quite a few of the Kernel things as well actually, but these guys do some awesome beers, and I would highly recommend that you check them out if you get the chance. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. As I say, thank you for watching. Check out my social media and check out the Kernel Brewery if you get the chance. This one was the Imperial Brown Stout, London 1856, based on a Barclay Perkins brewery recipe from that year. Awesome stuff from the Kernel, and I look forward to going and visiting the brewery in London sometime, fingers crossed, this year. Slàinte, skål, cheers.